recommended to mention the dowry in the marriage contract. Like to say, verbally for all the witnesses to hear, I now give my daughter in marriage to you for 10,000 American dollars, for a trip to Hajj, for teaching her how to recite the Quran, etc. Then by this, if there's any dispute, you can resort back to the witnesses. But it's not a condition to mention the dowry in the marriage contract. Now, when we say mention the dowry, it could be even that they mention the dowry without specifying what it is. Like they could say, I now give my daughter in marriage to you for the dowry that we have agreed upon. Then the groom says, I now accept your daughter in marriage for the dowry that we agreed upon. Or the one who's giving the woman away in marriage might say, for the dowry that you agreed upon. I only said we for my example, like he's her father and he was involved. But it could be just the man and the woman. They agreed upon the dowry amongst themselves. Then another brother, maybe he's acting as a judge, giving her away. He might not even know what the dowry is. So he could say, I now give her in marriage to you for the dowry that you have agreed upon. And then the man would say, I now accept her in marriage for the dowry that we agreed upon. Or he can just say, I accept. So then the dowry is mentioned in the marriage contract. And it's recommended to even specify it in the marriage contract so that the witnesses would hear that. If the dowry is not mentioned in the marriage contract at all, the contract is still valid. Like to say, I now give my daughter in marriage to you. And he says, I accept. That's valid. Then she deserves the dowry of a woman like her. In case the marriage contract was conducted without any mention of a dowry whatsoever, then she deserves the dowry of a woman like her. How do you determine the dowry of a woman like her? That's called in Arabic, mahrul mithl, a commensurate dowry. You take into consideration everything that makes her more or less desirable for marriage. Her beauty, her virginity, her knowledge, her ability to speak, etc. And you check the dowry of her sisters and her aunts and her mother to give you an idea of what's a dowry of a woman like her. Also, you check the dowry of the people of the culture. And by that, you can determine what's the dowry of a woman like her. The dowry does not have a minimum or a maximum, according to Ash-Shafi'i. So it can be very cheap. It can be a penny or a nickel. It can be a book or a scarf or something like that. And it can be very expensive, doesn't have a maximum. But the sunnah is to be easy, an easy dowry. Keep in mind here, the words easy and cheap are not synonyms. It's sunnah to be an easy dowry. So, for example, sisters, let's say a sister, she was desirous of a hefty dowry. If she wants something that's one might call a pretty penny and still do the sunnah, she might say, is this easy for you? Is 500,000 easy for you, brother? So the dowry does not have a minimum or a maximum. It is valid to marry her and make her dowry a known benefit, like taking her to Hajj or teaching her the obligatory knowledge or how to read Arabic or something like that. By doing the marriage contract, the time of doing the walima starts. But it's sunnah to delay it until after consummation. Then you invite your family and your friends. As for the word walima, when you say walima with no qualification, then it means the wedding banquet. And responding to it is obligatory. Responding to the invitation is obligatory unless you have an excuse. Like haram will be done there, or only the rich people are invited, or because you have some prior engagement, for example, if you have an excuse. It's enough to produce any food, doesn't have to be fancy. So it can be dates and tea, for example, something. If you want, you would prepare some meat and put something sweet with that meat without breaking the bones of the animal. Don't break its bones and put something sweet in the meat. Equality in giving the wives their turn is obligatory. If a man had a wife or wives, he does not have to spend time with them fundamentally. And some people have a misconception about this. What does this mean? He doesn't have to spend time with them fundamentally. It means, let's say a man married a woman. Does he have to take her home that night when he married her, or go home with her, or have a house for her? No. Does he have to consummate with her that night? No, he does not. How about the next day in particular? No, he doesn't. In 3 days, 3 is a sunnah number. No, he doesn't. So when, fundamentally, he doesn't have to. That's what it means. So when does he have to spend time with them? He has to spend time with them when he spends time with one of them. He has to spend time with his other wife or wives when he spends time with one of them. So that means once he spends time with one, he has to spend time with the rest of them. He does a drawing to determine who he starts with. Then he pulls their names out one by one and he goes to them in the order of the drawing. Once he finished going through them, he doesn't have to go back. He can stop then. And then again, he doesn't have to go to any of them. But once he wants to start again, then he has to see all of them. The minimum time that each one gets is a day and a night. And the maximum time that they can get without permission from another is 3 days and 3 nights. So a man, his obligation is a day and a night, and he has permission from Allah to take 3 days and 3 nights with one of his wives without asking for the permission from another. But he cannot do that more than 3 days without permission from the other or others. One does not enter the house of a wife that it's not her turn, except for a need. Yani, when it comes to having more than one wife and spending time with them, one's day is divided into 2 parts. We already said that the minimum time that a wife gets is a day. I mean by that 24 hours. So one's day, the man's day, is broken into 2 parts. The prime time and, let's say, working hours. Prime time and working hours. He cannot enter the house of the wife that it's not her turn, except for a detail. Is it an errand or an emergency or something urgent? If it's not any of that, then he can't do it. He doesn't even have an errand in her house. It's not her turn and he has nothing there. He just likes her a lot. He can't go. He cannot enter her house for no need. It's not her turn. So then either he has an errand that he needs to do or there's an emergency. Then he can enter into the house of the one that it's not her turn. But if it's just an errand and it's not an emergency, he can only do that during working hours, not during the prime time. Because the working hours, that's the time of the day when he does things, when he has to go around and take care of stuff. So included in that is that he can go into her house and take care of something, but he cannot be intimate with her. That's not permissible. So he just fulfills his need and then he leaves. That's it. But if it's an emergency, then he can go in during the prime time. If he married a new wife, he specifies her with 7 nights if she were a virgin and with 3 if she were already deflowered. When he has more than one wife and he marries a new wife, she automatically gets more than 1 day. How many days does she get? It depends on whether she was a virgin or not. If she was a virgin, then she gets 7 consecutive nights. That's her right. If she was deflowered, then she gets 3 consecutive nights. That's her right. And it's sunnah to offer her 4 more. So give her 7. She's bound to get 3. He can't get out of that. It's sunnah for him to offer her, when she's deflowered, 4 more so that it makes a complete week. However, there's a difference though. If his new wife is a virgin deserving 7 days, he does not have to make up those 7 days for his other wives when he starts his normal rotation. And likewise, if she's deflowered and she gets her 3 days, he does not have to make up any time for his previous wives when he starts his rotation. But if he gives the deflowered wife 7 days, then he makes up 7 days for the others. Subhanallah wa bihamdih. Anyone who understands something about life knows that what's being described here on the part of the man is not something easy. So if someone is looking at this issue from the perspective that, oh, he's getting lots of sex, great for him, then that's a very small view of it, an immature perspective. Although perhaps a woman's jealousy might make her feel like that. I mean, when I say that, I mean just out of the natural fact of it. Might make her feel like that, but it's there's a bigger picture than that. Now, if he feared his wife's rebellion, why would he fear his wife's rebellion? Like, she doesn't smile at him like she used to. The tone of her voice isn't as it was. She doesn't greet him like she used to. He noticed some change in her behavior. So now he might be afraid that she's going to snap on him. In particular here, there's 2 things that she wants to watch out for. 1 is leaving his house without his permission. And 2 is refusing sexual intercourse with him without an excuse. But just having some attitude, we're not talking about that here. When we talk about the wife's rebellion and the rules we're going to address now, we're not talking about just if she has a bad attitude or just she won't look at him, for example, or, you know, something like this, or she shuffle her feet, she doesn't feel like doing something or whatever. We're not talking about that. So, in particular, those 2 points that I mentioned for you. If he feared his wife's rebellion, then, as they say, he nips it in the bud. That means before it starts, he advises her. So he talks to her. And among what he can say to her is, don't forget the right of the husband over the wife. And fear Allah. It doesn't have to get to that point, but that's among what the scholars mentioned. So we should mention that. That's how you pass on the religious knowledge as it came. And it could be then that she apologizes and repents. Or she tells him what the issue was. Maybe she was sick. Maybe a relative died. So he advises her. If it goes beyond that and she does